Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Midnight News Bulletin brought to you live from Algiers. I'm your host, Miriam Zian, and here are your headlines. 9 Zionist massacres in the Gaza Strip claimed the lives of 86 people, while malnutrition has caused the death toll to rise to 20. Also coming up, Yemeni missile targeted a cargo tanker in the Gulf of Aden, killing 2 and injuring 6. And the United Nations warns that Sudan's war leaves millions of displaced people and faces an escalating humanitarian crisis. Hello and welcome again to the program. Palestinian Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip announced an increase in the number of victims and wounded in the aggressive war launched by the occupation on the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the ministry said that the occupation army committed 9 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip, claiming 86 martyrs and 113 injuries during the past 24 hours. This brings the death toll of the Zionist war against Gaza to rise to 30,717 martyrs and 72,156 injuries since the 7th of last October. In the central Gaza Strip city of Deir al-Balah, at least 3 Palestinians lost their lives and several others were injured as occupation aircraft targeted a house. Hussein Berkan.
Entering its 6th month, the war shows no sign of abating, with continuous bombings spanning from north to south in the Gaza Strip. Deir al-Balah witnessed a night bombing incident targeting a house, resulting in casualties and injuries.
The explosion took us by surprise. While we were in secure location, we only felt the impact after the bombing occurred. We were in shock for 2 minutes and didn't know where to go. Soon after, we left the house to witness this devastating scene, finding numerous innocent civilian victims.
As residents watched the horror and the extent of destruction, some attempt to clear away the rubble. Nusayrat camp, once again targeted by occupation artillery, sees rescuers racing to recover victims. The Ministry of Health in Gaza reports thousands of victims still in the rubbles and on roads, with the occupation hindering access. The majority of Gaza's population, totaling 2.4 million, now resides in tents, schools, and the open, as the war has razed their homes. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has reached catastrophic levels, with the United Nations warning of an impending famine.
As you say, everyone is hungry. It's been 4 or 5 months without any aid. People have lost weight. Children suffer from anemia and illnesses. Thirst, starvation, and poverty are rampant. People have nothing to eat, and some are falling unconscious from starvation.
The United Nations highlights the imminent threat of famine to 2.2 million people in Gaza, urging the international community to facilitate aid delivery to the Strip, suffering under the weight of the Zionist aggression.
The Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip announced that the death toll from malnutrition and dehydration in the Strip had risen to 18 or to 20 after a girl died on Wednesday in Al-Shifa Medical Complex as a result of malnutrition and dehydration. The ministry added that the announced death toll from malnutrition and dehydration reflects only what reaches hospitals and that it's believed that dozens die silently as a result of famine without ever reaching hospitals. Spokesman for the Ministry of Health warned that famine in northern Gaza has reached fatal levels, especially for children, pregnant women, and chronic patients. He stressed that the famine is spreading and will claim the lives of thousands of people if the occupation aggression is not stopped and if humanitarian and medical aid are not immediately brought into the Strip. In a recent statement, the Islamic resistance movement Hamas accused the occupation of evading key commitments in the agreement to comprehensively halt aggression against the Palestinian people, despite Hamas displaying flexibility. The occupation allegedly avoids measures for a permanent ceasefire, displaced individuals' return, Gaza Strip withdrawal, and addressing Palestinian needs. Hamas vowed to pursue negotiations through mediators to secure an agreement aligned with Palestinian demands. The U.S. seeks credit within the UN Security Council by proposing a ceasefire resolution providing a 6-week halt of fighting and a potential exchange of prisoners amid concerns over its policies and efforts to conceal its support for Israel after vetoing a similar draft resolution 3 times in a row. Marwa Balawar.
Washington, which has been isolated internationally due to its support for the Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip, is now trying to regain its position within the UN Security Council. It is willing to re-enter the UN Security Council with a modified draft resolution. US's return to the UN Security Council raises concerns about the idea of a ceasefire in relation with US policies.
The US now has to show how far can go in slowing or stopping the impunity of the colonial state, because recently blocking Algeria's draft resolution calling for permanent ceasefire in Gaza, nonetheless, the resistance in Gaza is still not defeated.
In light of the difficulties the Israeli occupation army is facing from the Palestinian resistance, including internal divisions, the United States is making an effort in the Security Council to provide an international political front that will conceal its transgressions and remove pressure on the Palestinian resistance.
The US officials are now, quote-unquote, worried about Ramadan, as if the occupation of Palestine is a political fiction episode set in the West Wing in the White House.
The ceasefire in Gaza will only last for 6 weeks, during which time all prisoners will be released in compliance with the terms of the US project, a formula tailored to the Israeli occupation interests, which observers and experts claim has ignored the approval by the Palestinian resistance groups, and all prisoners will be freed. An American formula that provides the occupation with what it has not been able to do on the ground during an aggression that lasted for more than 150 days, both politically and dramatically.
Australia and Southeast Asian nations ended a 3-day summit on Wednesday, calling for a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. In a joint statement, they stressed the community's concern over the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and condemned the attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, leading to a further deterioration of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, including restricting access to food, water, and other basic needs, reiterating the necessity of an immediate ceasefire on humanitarian grounds. The 161st regular session of the Arab League Council at the ministerial level was held on Wednesday in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, to to discuss files and issues, including developments in the situation in the Gaza Strip. In his speech, the League's Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait said that the occupation is trying to convince the world that the war only aims to eliminate Hamas, but it is a war of genocide against an entire people. He added that the means of this war are bullets, bombs, and the deliberate starvation of the population, according to a plan aimed at killing the largest number of people in the Gaza Strip and displacing the remaining ones.
لقد حاول الاحتلال إقناع العالم بأنه يدير حرباً على حماس.
The occupation has tried to convince the world that it is waging a war against Hamas based on a plan to eradicate it. But the truth was unveiled. It is a total genocide against an entire people. Its means are bullets, bombs, and starvation. Indeed, what is going on in Gaza since weeks and months is a deliberate starvation of the population according to a plan aimed at sowing total chaos in the Strip and deal a blow to all forms of civilian systems, in addition to the killing of the largest number of people and displacement of those who can be displaced outside of the Gaza Strip.
من يمكن تهجيرهم إلى خارج القطاع.
Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf stressed that Algeria will continue its efforts and endeavors to ensure that the UN Security Council bears its responsibilities towards the sufferings of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip based on strict instructions from Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. In his speech during the 161st regular session of the Council of the League of Arab States at the ministerial level, Attaf called for the necessity of taking practical measures and intensifying collective efforts to stop the bloodbath and genocide and to put an end to the crimes committed by the occupation in the Gaza Strip.
As a league, we must take practical steps and intensify our collective efforts to end the bloodbath and genocide. In this regard, and under strict instructions from the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria, which has placed the Palestinian issue at the center of its priorities and its movements since its accession to the Security Council, will continue its efforts and endeavors and multiply its attempts until the Council assumes its full and complete responsibilities towards the Palestinian people.
Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf stressed the need to contribute to ending the immunity with which the Zionist occupation is protected, expressing Algeria's support for issuing a punitive measure that would lead to freezing the membership of the Zionist entity in the United Nations. Let's take a listen.
As for the second level of priorities that we bear the responsibility as an Arab group to urgently foster, is the necessity or the imperative to efficiently contribute to breaking the immunity wall that the occupation has always benefited from and took advantage of exclusive treatments, favoritism, privileges and exceptions. My country supports the necessity of taking action before the UN General Assembly in order to issue a punitive measure by freezing Israel's membership, following suit to the historic measures that were taken by our UN organization against the apartheid system in South Africa until it disappeared and faded away.
The head of the Algerian diplomacy also stressed the need to advance the Arab position to be at the level of the sacrifices of the people of the Gaza Strip, calling for the restoration of the Arab leadership role in defending the Palestinian cause and consolidating the Arab position towards the Zionist entity. Let's take a listen.
It is necessary to enhance the Arab position with bravery and boldness so that it lives up to the sacrifices and resilience of our people in the Gaza Strip. It is imperative for the Arab position to regain its pioneering role in defending the central issue of our Arab and Islamic nation, so that the rest of the international community can follow suit. We also have to consolidate the Arab position against the Israeli occupier at the diplomatic, political, and economic levels.
Mr. Ahmed Attaf also renewed the call to take the necessary measures to enable the State of Palestine to obtain full membership in the United Nations, especially since it has become an urgent international demand.
There is no future for Gaza except within an independent and sovereign Palestinian state, based on the 1,967 borders, with Al-Quds as its capital. The Israeli occupier must know that it has no veto against the establishment of the Palestinian state, and that this state was provided by the United Nations 76 years ago, based on their strong convictions on the necessity to improve the Palestinian national project. Algeria calls for taking the necessary actions to enable the brotherly Palestinian state to obtain full membership within the UN organization.
Mr. Ahmed Attaf briefed the League of the Secretary General of the Arab States, Ahmed Abul Ghait, in Cairo on Algeria's efforts within the Security Council. The meeting, part of the 161st session of the League of Arab States, focused on key agenda items, particularly developments in the Palestinian issue. Attaf updated Abul Ghait on Algeria's initiatives to establish a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and address the dire humanitarian situation resulting from the Zionist aggression. Minister Attaf engaged with Kuwaiti counterpart Abdullah Al-Yahya to discuss the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Their meeting aimed to address the critical situation and strengthen collaborative efforts to halt Zionist aggression. Attaf also extended congratulations to Al-Yahya on his recent appointment, fostering relations between the two nations. Additionally, talks with Mauritanian counterpart Mohamed Salem Ould Merzouk focused on joint Arab endeavors to end aggression by Zionist forces in Gaza. Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf held on Wednesday bilateral talks in Cairo with his Egyptian counterpart Samah Shukri. A ministry release indicated that the meeting allowed for examining the distinguished relations of brotherhood and cooperation between the two countries and discussing ways to advance them to broader levels ahead of future bilateral events. The two parties also discussed developments in the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, in addition to topics related to inter-coordination at the continental level. President Mahmoud Abbas emphasized that achieving security and peace necessitated an end to the Zionist occupation in the state of Palestine, designating East al-Quds as its capital. During a joint press conference with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Abbas highlighted the importance of Palestinian unity and aligning with international commitments. Discussions with Erdogan covered recent developments, strategies to counter Zionist aggressions, and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the West Bank, and al-Quds.
I have reviewed with His Excellency President Erdogan the latest developments in the Palestinian territories and the means to stop the brutal Israeli aggression and mass genocidal war against our people and their valuables in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and al-Quds, and to work hard to allow entry of humanitarian aid, prevent the displacement of Palestinian people from their homes, and stop the holding of funds and suffocation of Palestinian economy by the occupation's government.
For his part, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said Israel would face severe consequences if it banned Palestinian Muslims for entering the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the coming month of Ramadan. Let's take a listen.
Yaklaşmakta olan Ramazan ayı bağlamında
Within the context of the approaching month of Ramadan, we are relying our messages to the necessary places regarding the need to prevent provocations. Radical Israeli politicians' demands to restrict entrance of Muslims to the Al-Aqsa Mosque is complete nonsense. Taking such a step will undoubtedly have grave consequences.
şüphesiz çok ağır olacaktır.
The Algerian presidency said that Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune paid a visit to the family of Abdul Nasser Arar, a Palestinian who is receiving treatment at the Ain Najah military hospital in the capital. The same source added that the Palestinian family was a victim of the barbaric Zionist attack on the Gaza Strip. In other developments, the French news agency AFP said that a missile launched from Yemen targeted a cargo tanker in the Gulf of Aden on Wednesday, with crew members announcing that 2 people were killed and 6 wounded. The same source reported that the strike caused significant damage to the Liberian-owned ship flying the Barbados flag. For his part, the military spokesman for the Houthi group, Yahya Sari, announced the targeting of the American ship True Confidence in the Gulf of Aden and causing damage to it, reiterating the group's commitments to targeting Zionist ships and those heading to the occupied Palestinian territories. Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati said indirect talks to end hostilities along the Lebanese-Israeli border will begin during the holy month of Ramadan. In an interview on Tuesday night with a local Lebanese broadcaster, Mikati said Lebanon's parliament speaker Nabih Berri was studying a proposal suggested verbally by U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein, who was in Beirut on Monday.
God willing, the intel says there will be a ceasefire in Gaza before Ramadan. On our matters, there will be negotiations during the month of Ramadan.
Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune visited Sheikh Hassan, the supervisor of the Quranic school in Ghazmir in Adrar, southern Algeria, at the Ain Najah military hospital in the capital, Algiers. To Senegal now, where Senegalese President Macky Sall dissolved the government and named Interior Minister Sidiki Kaba as the country's new Prime Minister. This was at the end of the Council of Ministers held last afternoon. The United Nations World Food Programme said Sudan's war has shattered millions of lives and created the world's largest displacement crisis. The UN organization added that this catastrophe also risks becoming the world's largest hunger crisis unless fighting stops. This comes as over 25 million people across Sudan, South Sudan, and Chad are trapped in a spiral of deteriorating food security. Nabil Khazini.
Sudan's war has created the largest displacement crisis in the world. Hunger is becoming rampant across the country, with 18 million people suffering from food insecurity and 5 million on the brink of famine. What could be worse for a country already sinking in war? Since the bloody fighting began last April, Sudan's crisis haven't stopped. The extent of the crisis was manifested when the United Nations said yesterday that Sudan risks facing the world's largest hunger crisis unless fighting stops.
The war in Sudan is sending millions spiraling into what could soon be the world's largest hunger crisis. In South Sudan, I've met mothers and children who have fled violence many times. They've escaped the fighting, but they struggle to escape the hunger.
Right now, 90% of the people here face emergency levels of hunger and are stuck in areas that are largely inaccessible to aid agencies. In South Sudan, where 600,000 people have taken refuge to escape the war, 1 in every 5 children in shelters at the border suffers from malnutrition. Little international aid is getting into that, as humanitarian agencies struggle to get the necessary entry permits.
So the greatest risk to the aid operation is the conflict. And the biggest losers are obviously the civilians who are suffering from conflict, but also from its consequences. And the food insecurity situation, the famine situation, the danger of famine situation is now a critical factor.
As Sudanese people live some of the toughest time due to war and hunger crisis, their fear now is that they will be forgotten.
The International Atomic Energy Agency chief Rafael Grossi met Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday after tense talks with energy officials over safety at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Russian media reports said the Russian president confirmed on Wednesday that his country is making every effort to raise the level of safety in nuclear facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, our broadcast has come to an end. Thank you for joining us, and a special thanks to our dedicated technical staff and hard-working team in the newsroom. Take care and have a good night.